Good evening. I don't know how happy I am to be here, but I'm here. This is always a challenge because I have mixed groups. Some of you don't know me. We've done workshops together, and a lot of you are students of mine. So setting this thing up, I said to Mike, what can I do? I don't know if I can deliver anything. He said, just do what you do, you're going to be fine. So that's pretty much what I'm going to do. And I know people ask, what brushes did you use? What paints do you use? If you have those questions, I'm happy to answer it. But if you read my little blurb about changes in attitudes, kind of a takeoff on Jimmy Buffett's Changes in Latitudes, I have changed over the years and have tried to deliberately become less tight. That goes back quite a ways. There was a group of us that evolved from this group here called the Soggy Paper Six. And we would get together monthly and meet, and we would basically solve the world's problems first, then we'd have dinner, and then we'd sit down and critique a piece that we brought. And each piece that we brought was the topic was suggested the month before by whoever held the dinner that night. So if someone said water, then we all had to do a painting with water in it. I remember one time, typically when I say water, it's probably a pond or a lake or something, and one of the fellas brought a faucet with a drip coming out of it. That's creativity. That's where we'd like to go and like to be, is creative. I stress quite a bit lately because of this evolution I'm going through here. It's called an aging process. About not copying things and allowing what you know to come out. Well, what do you know? Every time you paint, you learn something. Good or bad, you learn something. And the more you do it, the better you are going to be and make your paintings better. What do you know? When I teach, I start with beginners, and then they follow through. Very simple. I have a simple palette. I have brushes, as you can see in there. I probably use 3 or 4 of them. The rest are decoration. But I think we evolve into that. We find what we like and what works for us, and then we stick with that. So again, back to beginner classes, basically playing with the sphere, the cylinder, and the cube. Basically working with the sunlight or a light source coming in from one side, that's the illuminated side, and the other side is the shaded side. Try and make it as simple as possible, because for the most part, all we want to do is just paint. We just want to pick up some color in the brush and stick it in there and make something out of it. There's no right or wrong. You've all been in situations where you've painted together, whether it's just 2 of you or 20 of you, and no 2 paintings are alike. You can be painting the same subject and attacked differently each time, and you hope it is, because that's you putting some of yourself into that. So lately I've been telling people, don't trust your eyes. Your eyes see something and they send a message to your brain, and your brain tells your hand what to do. Well, sometimes you got to let your heart and your gut come in a little bit and say, does it have to be just like that? And no, it doesn't. You want to interpret your reference material. You don't want to copy it. It's just what it is, reference. So use it as reference and then build from that. I'm going to sneak up on my painting here. We good? We're clear?
Sneaking up on the white paper.
We'll see if we can do something about that. I will try and talk as much as I can while I paint, and what will come out are basically thoughts as well as expressions and maybe even suggestions. This is what I do, and that's what this demo is about. To cover the basics, there are Holbein paints, and the only reason I have Holbeins is because when I was teaching at Hyatt's in Clarence, the manager at the time suggested these because they were a little less expensive than Winsor Newton, which is the paint I always used. And that was suggested to me by a gentleman named Bill Gates, who was one of the Soggy Paper Six. Bill also told me if you want to be loose, Dan, then use the biggest brush you can handle in your hand. I also pass it on to my students. I don't force anybody to paint a certain way. I don't care. I feel my job in expressing watercolors is how you might use them. Because you're going to bend, spindle, and mutilate as you paint. I'd like to think that anyways. My style in my classes is I do a step, they do a step, I do a step, they do a step. That stems from my times learning back when, and the demonstrator would demonstrate in the morning, then we'd paint in the afternoon. I don't remember what they did in the morning, or she. What, are you kidding me? So that's why I decided to do the step-by-step, and it seems to work out fairly well. All right, Mike alluded to my wildlife, and that's what I used to do pretty regularly. Travel the East Coast doing different wildlife shows, and that is challenging because you're going into a situation where every painting in the building is wildlife. So people coming in interested in wildlife have to choose from 500, 600, 800, 1,000 different paintings that are all wildlife. But that's what I like to do. That's what was interesting to me. I was also early on, I don't know how many of you were involved in painting barns. Do you still paint barns? And you can see barns over there. If you travel and do shows and you're from New York State, people say, oh, you paint barns. Something about barns in New York State. Pennsylvania is almost about the same. But I liked wildlife, I had an interest in it, and I was just coming into it at the time in our history where we were more concerned about taking care of wildlife. The whales, the wolves, trying to think else was a biggie.
Snowy owls.
Yeah.
Owls, swans,
And there was a gentleman from Canada named Robert Bateman. He's not watercolor, but he was very well known. He came down here a couple times, and he would paint, like you say, owls. Everybody was painting owls. He'd paint wolves. Everybody was painting wolves. It kind of ran in some kind of a cycle. So anyways, I start teaching, and where is I won't say my expertise, but my interest lies in birds. And it wasn't too long when the student came up to me and said, Mr. Meyer, do we have to paint another bird? Well, that's what I do, and birds and ducks and mammals. So I had to change up. If you were to look at Bateman's paintings, they're not just about an animal, they're about the environment. So it wasn't too hard for me to swing to other subject matter because every species that I painted had some sort of environment around it. So you're painting flowers and trees and shrubs and boats and water and fog and the whole shebang. And then that started to broaden in including, and I didn't bring any. Well, I have one, but I'm afraid to stand up and get it, so later. Portraits, people. And I had the good fortune to spend a weekend when our society had that gig at the Birchfield. What was it, about 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that? Well, Margaret Martin was still alive. She was in it. Margaret Roseman from Canada. Phil Burke was there. John Salmonen, I think.
Yes.
And Mary White. Sabin. And it was fantastic. So I took all I could from Mary, and I snuck one of Margaret's in as well. Every time I studied with somebody, I was not there to absorb everything, because I'm not good at absorbing everything. You got to tell me a number of times, and then maybe it'll stick in my head. At least that's what my teachers were telling my parents anyway. So, anywho, so if I got one thing that I felt I could use in my painting, I thought either the workshop, the weekend, or whatever it was worthwhile. So that's all I looked for, was something I could use and hang on to. Brushes, are you looking at this here? Yeah, all right, so you see the array, and I basically have a few that I generally go to, and I used to work, I try and work with the same thing I suggest for my students. This set of Princeton brushes, there's 6 of them in there. There's 2 flats, 2 or 3 rounds, and a rigger, and it's under $20. I'm pretty rough on my brushes, so I might beat them up in a 2-year period, and for $20 I can get another set of them. But they seem to hold up the best. They're synthetic. I like synthetic over natural hairs. I like the fact that they snap back into position again. And this is golden tacklin. I've basically been working on that for a while. There's one particular student here, in fact there's 2, who had suggested to me maybe trying, and I think I saw Sally walk in too. They said that they paint with Sally, and she uses brushes from King Art. So I bought a few of those as well. And I was using this one the other day, which had become a favorite of mine, and I beat the living daylight out of the back end because I get in there and I scrub. I'm just hard on brushes, and I'm lazy about, let's get out the brush that I scrub with, and let's get out this brush that I do that. I just use the brush in my hand and go with it. Even little stuff, my students will be going, oh my God, how does he get that with that big brush? I take advantage of the tips, the corners, the edge, and this particular one came down to a nice narrow chisel point at the end of the hairs. And you can get a nice line when you're lifting out, you can get a nice line when you're putting down, so I kind of roll with that. I use a toothbrush. I have riggers. In the rounds, I'm maybe using an 8. And then if things get small, I'll use a smaller brush for that, like the eyes and the birds. All right, subject matter. How do I choose something? What am I going after? I want to be inspired, so I just keep my eyes open and I look. When we were doing shows, the advantage was we got to travel. The disadvantage was the show was during the day, so you only got out either late afternoon or in the evening. Now, in the summertime, the show was going, you still had some light to shoot by. And if you got up early in the morning, went out, you'd have morning light to shoot by, both of which is pretty good. The midday stuff, the sun's overhead, I like mornings and evenings because of the value changes. I love value changes, and that's what I teach. I'm not big on color. I don't care what color you use. That gig that was at Birchfield, and Margaret Roseman and Margaret Martin, they had a panel for discussion. And Margaret Roseman said she believed in the color, the variety of color changes in colors, the values of color. And Margaret Martin said, well, it's really the values, not so much the color. Oh no, Margaret, it's the colors. Why, no, Margaret, it's the values. So I was trying to get something out of anything. I decided it was the value of any given color. So that's basically what I play with. The other thing and not to belabor this, but today, so many of us have phones that take quality pictures. I mean, it's unbelievable what the camera portion of these phones will do. However, there's no film involved. It's all captured digitally. So there's an interpretations of little zeros and ones, and they're going to tell the mechanics of your phone what colors these things they believe they saw. I take that and I move that to my computer. It interprets those numbers, and I see another picture on my screen. I've never really compared the back of my, and I have a digital camera, the back of that with the screen, but I'm telling you right off the bat, I don't think they match. And then the big problem is looking at that screen, the computer, and then sending it to my printer to print out photographs. And then I hand these photographs out to these people. I cannot tell you, my apologies, students, how many people would say, well, how do I get that color? Because the color is up to you. You need to interpret that. I want you to think back as to what you know. Are you going to tell me you haven't been outside and you haven't seen a tree? Have you looked at the bark on the tree? Have you looked at the leaves on the tree? Have you looked at those same leaves at the 4 different seasons of the year? Does it change? Do they vary? And then depending on the light during the time of day and whether the leaf is curled or bending, and seriously, you need to match what's here? Open up, let it fly, go for it. Pick a green you like. Simple palette, I basically have 2 greens here, which is hookers and sap. There is a shadow green in there, but for my shadow greens, I've been adding alizarin to hookers green. And I'm trying to put color into color rather than mixing color into color so that you get a little bit of both going on. I know you're trying to get a particular color, and that's fine. But again, it's that using this artistic sense to make it yours. What can you do? What's your interpretation? Every well-known artist that we study, we learned about, they're in the books, they're in the museums, got there because they had a certain style, and they're all different. They created that. They found something in themselves to create something that was, I'll say, different. I mean, I cannot believe in days of old, people walked into the gallery, they walked into the art store and saw a couple of Picassos hanging on the wall and said, oh, that looked good in my house. Yeah. That's pretty scary. Anyhow, we have a small yard, but it's long, and about the back half of our yard in Waynesville is wooded. Not as nicely wooded as it used to be because most of the trees there are the green ash, and that boar got into them, and they're dropping like flies. I just talked to my neighbor yesterday, apologizing for the tree that's leaning over and busted a branch in his yard, and we're going to address that at some point, so there's a number of them down. But I have put a couple paths back there. I put a ton of daffodils back there because it's the only flower that the deer don't eat. There was a herd of 11 of them the other day passing through. I back up to the Amherst State Park, which was the old nuns' property, full of grasses and weeds and water and deciduous trees and shrubs and pine trees and apple orchard. Where do you think the deer go to eat?
You have a buffet.
I rarely prune anything. I just leave it up to them. The shrubs are chopped down, the daylilies are gone, the hosta gets eaten. And then, insult to injury, they poop on the path that I made. If they would step off and do it, I wouldn't mind so much. But. So walking in the backyard the other day, in one of our travels, I picked up Smokey the Bear, Prevent Forest Fires kind of sign, and I had one back there for the longest time, and it disappeared. So I have this one up there, and it's on a tree, one of the dead ones, and there's a hole. You can just, well, here, you can see it here. I believe a woodpecker went in there and created a hole. I don't know if he ever nested. It's not that high in the tree. But anywho, this sign was up there, and I guess the wood rotted enough the sign fell down, so I just put it down below and on the same tree because I like that hole there. Oh, the other day when I walked past this, there was a downy woodpecker on there. I didn't have my camera with me, but that to me was an inspiration. That's kind of cool. So I went through my morgue, which is where you keep your photos that you collect, and I try to categorize them. Flowers, mammals, water, sky. I break it down to every species of bird because I do birding. So going through, I found this guy and decided I will do him along with the sign. So how do I start? Sitting upstairs in my studio, I didn't have any paper around except this little notepad here. And I opened it up and I started sketching. I know you're going to have a hard time seeing this unless somebody comes in tight. But I drew the bird, and then I kind of indicated the tree, and then I put the sign in there. Now the whole sign isn't in there. And then I decided it's pretty vertical. It's not a really good design. And how are you going to divide this up? We all know the basics for laying a piece out, correct? You divide your paper into thirds. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. 1/3, 2/3, 3/3. You got it? Yeah. All right, so this bird is basically in the upper left quadrant, or that upper where the lines cross. Those are the keys. 1, 2, 3, 4 are the ideal spots for your subject matter. That changes, of course, if you're doing the portrait. But anywho, for something that's a painting of sorts, you do that. So that's why I targeted that. And then you get this big tree, and what else are you going to put there? Well, I wanted the sign in there. But if you put the whole sign in, the bird's going to be pretty small. And people have a really bad habit of trying to read the sign. I do hieroglyphics almost all the time, which means whatever lettering, numbers are on things, they're kind of, you know, you might see something, but it's not all there. I do want you to know that this is a sign related to forestry or the prevention of forest fires. But I don't need the whole thing in there. And this is going to be rather legible. But I have PLEAS. You take a guess as to what that might say. Part of Smokey is here, and his name is on his hat, and that'll be spelled out. So those two things, one which will be complete and the other one partial, should send a message as to where you think this bird is. Without that sign, he could be anywhere. With the sign, you would like to think he's in a forested area. So now the wheels start turning. You know that hole I talked about in the tree? Wouldn't it be cute if there was a little squirrel in there looking out? So who's that knocking on my home, you know? The other thing I thought about was a bullet hole in the sign. Having done some shows, I won't specifically say where, but in rural areas, I have seen, you see the deer crossing signs with the holes in them where the kids have shot things in. But I opted to leave that out. So I altered this a little bit by putting the tree at an angle. The bird is somewhat vertical on the tree. The sign is tipped in the other direction. So now you've got some design characteristics going on, making shapes, these arrowheads to lead you to certain points of interest. This section over here was blank, and I don't like blank. And it was a trough. I don't like troughs. So I said, I'll put another branch from this big tree off there and send it in this direction, which takes care of that. It also helps to send you up into this cavity where this bird is sitting. You'll want to go down and read the sign, but the sign isn't complete. And when the things aren't complete, the viewer wants to go to that which is whole or complete or more finished. You have the power to drive the viewer to that which you want them to look at. Use the force. I'm also going to try and help move the viewer's eye to the bird by using darks to the outside edge, because lights attract. Darks go back. Go to the light, Carrie Ann. So if that bird is the lightest or the brightest, I can help get you there by not having a bright light on the right side of this trunk or even the sign down here. Now, I shot this sign a couple of times walking around the backyard. You can see that this one's a little darker. These are two different photos, by the way, in case you're getting, thank you. And this one, I'm not sure if it's this shot or not, but in the computer, we have devices to bend, spindle, mutilate, and manipulate. And there's a source in my computer called curves, where I can change the balance of all the colors to virtually brighten the shot up. So when I do that, does that not tend to also perhaps change the color? So again, what's the point of following exactly what's on here? The best thing you can do for yourself is work from your own photos. I would like to think when you were there, you were so excited about the scene, you took the picture. Oh, this is great, and you look in the back of your camera and it's great, it's wonderful. I'd love to paint that. Just be aware not every photograph makes a good painting. Some should be left as photographs. But my point is, you're probably going to paint things that you're most familiar with better than things that you're not. If you have a flower garden, you've looked at flowers all the time every day during the flowering season. Pets, you have a dog, you look at that dog every day, that cat every day, that bird, what have you, you get very familiar with it. So when it comes to painting that, you should probably do a little better at that which you're unfamiliar with. But we have these fantastic opportunities to familiarize ourselves called the web. I often go online, images of, and then put in whatever it is I'm looking for. Perhaps for colors of birds to see if the photograph I took, if I can't quite remember, maybe they're transitioning into breeding season or they're going out the other direction. And there'll be all kinds of photos for that. So you have an opportunity to look those things up if you're so inclined. So the bird's going to be painted, I guess, the most carefully, I'd say. The other stuff, I hope to be a little more random. My first applications of color are what I call blocking in. I usually pick the lighter color within that area and just slap it down. 9 times out of 10, I'm standing up, but not tonight. I will stay down. So in this case, what I make sure I do is get my arm off the table and use the entire arm in action, my hand and my wrist. None of this stuff. This little inchworm painting. You want to try, at least I believe, you want watercolor to do what it likes to do, and that is move. And that's to change. It's to blend. It's to meld one color into the other. So all you need to do is understand it. You don't need to manipulate it. You just need to understand what's going to go on and then make your application of color and accept what happens. Maybe it's a lot of water you put in. Maybe it's a little water. Maybe it's a lot of color. Maybe it's just a little color. Each time you do that, there's a different action going on. And with the amount of water that's on the paper, is it real wet? Is it kind of dry? Is it too dry? Is it just right? How do you know when it's just right? You've got to find that magic moment, and you find it every time you paint. So again, the more you paint, I like to think the better you're going to be with it. Okay. I'm just thinking here.
I have a question.
Not out loud at the moment. I will try and do my best to hear you, but
Well, I'm just going with the lighting, because we can't get these light off. Can you, then, the lights on the table, can you get it more on the paper that you could be drawing on? As long as you're not in the way.
I think you'll see a big difference once the paint hits it.
Okay.
Is that better? You sense a little bit?
Yeah. Thank you.
Last time I was here, I don't know how many years ago it was, I did a long one with, egret flying across the grasses and never finished the grasses. So when Mike asked me if I'd be interested this time, I thought, I wonder if I could pull that painting out. Maybe I could finish it. It's around someplace. I saw it, but I couldn't get my hands on it. So I will do my best to get through this one as best I can. All right, so the tree is going to be barky. I do bark via dry brush. So it's going to have some color in it first. Once it dries, and I may use the hairdryer. I'm not a hairdryer guy. I like to think that the color needs to be absorbed into the paper. As a professional, I usually stretch the paper. quickly. That is to soak it in the sink with a soft sponge. I wipe off both sides. It releases the surface sizing that they put on to protect the paper. There is sizing, a glue of sorts holding all your fibers together, but you break the tension on that. And because this is 100% cotton, it is essentially like a piece of cloth. There's no wood fibers in here. So any of you who have done any seamstress work know that you wash your material before you sew it up, because if you go the other way and then you wash it, wherever you stitch it, you get puckers. So I will put this in the sink, I'll raise it up, let it drain down, I lay it on some paper towels, I wipe both surfaces down with that sponge, I squeeze it out, I lay it onto a board that I can staple into. Bang! And I hit, staple, stretch, staple, going all the way around. I set it aside and let it dry, and it actually shrinks just like material might do. Now I have a stretched piece. It's flatter. When I apply water to it, it doesn't buckle like it does here. But this is not stretched. This is the way I do classes. We're going for it. It's just you guys. You're all friends. What the heck, you know? So. Light source. I always examine the light source. And there is no direct light source here. I'm pretty sure I was shooting this bear maybe afternoon, and that light was coming in this way. And the way the downies look in here, it's pretty much overhead. The trees on's pretty well balanced, but I'm going to play a little bit with what I know as much as what I see, and that is to push you into the light and to try and make that tree cylindrical, so dark on one side, light on the other, and we'll go from there. When I teach trees, I have a recipe that I use that is pretty funky and daring. But I may do some of that here. Again, when I do beginner class, I usually, it's cruel of me to do, but I'll have people, I'll say, why don't you paint me a tree? Inevitably, a small brush comes out, they reach for the brown, and they paint the trunk up and down. They put the branches on, then they come in and slap some leaves on it. I don't find too many brown trees. If you examine them, to me, they're mostly gray. They could be a warm gray or a cool gray, but they have gray tones in them. So this piece that I'm going to do here, because this is all for fun, this is a suggestion. If this was and it really is. The tree's close up, so if this was in your face and you wanted to have some fun with it, you might go this route. So the recipe basically is yellow ochre, cerulean blue, burnt sienna, and ultramarine blue. Warm, cool, warm, cool. When that first cool, the cerulean, hits the yellow ochre, what might you expect? Green. Do you want that in your tree? You decide whether you want it in there or not. So sometimes I leave that out. How much fun would that be, you know? The other decision, work wet, work dry. When you work dry, the stroke that you put down is going to stay exactly where you put it. When you work wet, it's going to travel, it's going to go someplace. The more you experience those, you know how wet that paper should be, how dry that paper should be, how far anything's going to travel. The other thing is, how fast a painter are you? By the time you get done painting the first color you want to put down, and you go with the second one, I need for that first one to still be wet. If you played and messed around with it too long and it's dry, you're not going to get the same kind of action you'd like to have. So I should have gone around and moistened everything here, but I'm going to take a chance and just go for it. So. This is cerulean going into that. And burnt sienna. Notice how carefully I apply the color. And then French ultramarine blue. I want to get a little more burnt sienna in here, though. Light's basically coming this way. So let's figure the top of this branch is somewhat illuminated. Going through my same sequence of colors here. Oh, and I forgot this down here. This is more the main trunk down here. But that sign's probably shading that a little bit, so we'll throw some schmutz in there. I generally have 2 containers of water at home. One's always clean and the other one's dirty. And I should have done my bird first because now I've contaminated my water, so just bear with me. I want to put some shading into the bird. I usually use a blue in order to keep the white looking fresh and white. If you, in this photo, I'm guessing you would interpret that as gray, and it would be, could be, but it might make it look a little too dirty. Now, I'm not sure I want pure blue. When I do my shading, I used to use ultramarine blue, a little burnt sienna, get a nice gray out of it. For shading, I've been going to cobalt, but I'll take just a little burnt sienna and put it into the cobalt to knock it back a click, take that electricity out of it, as I kind of refer to it. And again, I'm just being somewhat down and dirty here. Ordinarily, I'd probably wet the whole bird so that I get that soft transition of color. What can you see and can't you see here? You can't see much anything, right? Bad glare on the photo? Oh, thank you. So this softness here, that definitely says wet into wet. So Debbie's been very kind to bring me some clean water, so let's just wet this thing down here. And I see you got a little glistening stage is what you're looking for. That's where it's not glossy, like the stage back here, shiny. It's not flat, like the tabletop. It just has a little bit of a sheen to it, what we refer to in furniture, and that is semi-gloss. So you can also test it with the back of your hand and your eyeballs. And this room is extremely warm, so the water has been absorbed. So I'm going to put another little dash of color in there. In the meantime, as long as we keep rolling here, there's some shadows coming across that sign. Sometimes I'll put shadows in afterwards, sometimes I'll put them in ahead of time. So let's put some in ahead of time. It's a nice, 1.5, 2-inch brush, whatever. I don't think I've ever had paint in this thing other than accidentally like catching some of it now. This is basically for laying in a big area of water. And now that's super wet. The background is going to be done softly and diffused because the dry brush on this trunk will look hard edged. The bird's going to be hard. The sign's going to be somewhere in between. I might be hitting that sign before I hit the bird, frankly, because I don't mind where that goes. You can see that shadows from the trees and the trunks and what have you in that area. This is my bird color. So I'm going to change those shadows basically to a gray using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. Simple palette, I don't change much. Part of the reason for that is I try and stick with 2 colors and mix. It's easier to remember, and with less in the palette, it's easier to remember which colors you mixed to get what color you had. Rather than which blue did I use? Well, how many you got? I think I got 4 or 5 in here, but anywho. I like cool, so I'm a little more to the ultramarine side than the burnt sienna. Maybe I should allow more warm colors on the sign, but that's kind of in between. So, all right, so you're going to be looking at this sign. You're going to see smoky. You're going to read it. I'm just going to tone this corner down. That's too much. Corner down a little bit. Lay the color and let it do its thing. And down here I'll be a little more, that paper's dried out already. That's incredible. So I'll put a little dark in the corner and maybe a couple little spots over here. Wind the corner. Go to the light, Carrie-Ann. So this dark in the corner will help push you up into the whiter, lighter part of the sign. Get some more color in here too. If this was nice and wet, I'll take my chance with it anyway. So. I'd like that to bleed more, but it didn't. The bird's just a little beyond where it should be. This is where I swear. I'm swearing more these days too, but it's healthy. Feels good, you know. So shaded down at the lower portion here. So we'll put the color in down here at the bottom. And actually it's just the right temperature or moisture content. It's bleeding quite nicely. And some of these whites in here have color in them, not pure white. Pure white's going to scream, and you really don't want that coming off either. That's pretty good. This has got a little schmutz going on. Put a little color in there, and he's got some up here in his head. This is very difficult for me. I usually fail. When you're putting color on white paper, it looks dark until you get it dark around it, and then you're going, geez, I didn't put enough color on there. The biggest problem for me is the cobalt. Cobalt likes to dry lighter than normal colors do. So you have to be a little generous with it. Put a little more in than you really want and go for it. Look at the blossom up here in the wood. Isn't that great? That's awesome. How many of you would be tempted to go in the brush and try and smooth that out? Don't lie to me. Yeah, I know. Do you want to break or?
Is there time for a break if you want to stop for a minute?
Yeah, it's a little after 8. Yeah, cool. And the rest of this can dry down and then we'll attack it. So while you were consuming, I put some color in. Around the rim of the sign, I threw some color in on Smokey's hat. I got some on his skin. And I just put some color into the background around the bird because I want to get some values in there. Now that outside of the bird is going to be pretty down and dirty. So I've grabbed some, and again, simple colors basically. I've grabbed some hookers, I've grabbed some sap. I can throw either one of the yellows into either of those colors and brighten them, or blues to darken them up. So all I want to do is try and emphasize some greenery, that this is more woodsy of sorts. So I will just lay some sap in here. And I pre-moistened this so it's nice and wet and juicy. I haven't even waited for the glistening stage. And then I grab some hookers. A little stronger hookers. And I set it down. I'm hardly even painting. I'm more or less just putting a brush full of color down and just letting it go. I'm trying to be conscious of where the lightest lights are in the bird. I've just kind of covered part of that up now, but I put in some dark green where that white patch is on his back. Anything's going to hold up front here because his breast is pretty light or white. I'm going to bring a little Windsor blue. Actually, this is Prussian blue. Windsor blue green shade. Windsor blue green shade into the green, and just drop that in there. Again, trying to be a little conscious about what's dark on the bird and where color should be emphasized. I'm really firing through this thing here, so. Use the edge of the brush to get a little ragged, feathery kind of look coming off his breast there. So we got some coloration going on there. He's going to be pretty dark, so all that light's going to pop out on him, I believe. I'm going to watch for this area to come into the glistening stage, and then I'm going to hit it with a squirt bottle and makes little blossoms and just kind of disturbs the area, makes it maybe a little busy looking, but anywho, just to give it some little more character and what have you. But boy, does it help to get color in that white paper and kick that back. I got a lot going on here, but I'm thinking that the bear's going to take up some, and I'm going to do a little other whatchamajigger. The outer rim of this is breaking down a little bit. I put a bead of gray in there, so let me get something dark for there as well, which is essentially the same dark I'll be using in the bird. So my dark is ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. It's my go-to darkest dark. I don't use any, the other darkest dark I have is Payne's Gray, but I don't use any black. Black to me is just flat. It's not exciting. And the thing about ultramarine is it's sedimentary, so it likes to settle into the cavities of the paper, where the burnt sienna may sit on the top and stain the surface, so you get that separation. You can get some neat stuff going on. Most evident when it's light. When it's dark like this, you really don't see much. I just laid some color in there, and then I'll go back in with a damp brush and just disturb some of these pockets. Soften some so I get some kind of a blend and bleeding going on. Just to make things, try and make it a little more interesting. What is it also doing? It's creating a soft edge. And what happens to the viewer's eye? They go someplace else. They want a hard edge. They need something positive to follow. So we just mess with that a little bit. I might even soften some of them to the interior. And that bird's got a nice bright piece of red up in the back of his head, so I'll find the brightest red I got here. And it does get a little darker coming around, so I've got a little darker red. I could also just darken that red either by popping a little alizarin or even some blue into it, so no big deal here. Before I do that, I need to attack that green. If I put that red in there, it's going to hit the green and bleed, so my apologies. So let's see what water bottle can do here. So I have an adjustable nozzle on the bottle, and we're not doing windows. It's like spinning. So if I just hit the trigger lightly, and for whatever reason this bottle shoots sideways, so it just like spits. See that? Or don't you see it? So blossom buds on trees, whatever. Now that's going to spread. It could get, it's really nice like this. I did this yesterday? And we decided if I hit it with the hairdryer, I could stop the action right then and there, which is probably a good idea. But I won't take the time to do that here. Let's see what we can do with dry brush. This is a big tree. This could use some substantial bark. I do my dry brush similar to the way I did the color application. I'm going to have the bark a little lighter on the light side, and it'll be pretty dark when it gets over to the darker side. So I'm up in my row of earth tones here, which is raw sienna, burnt sienna, raw umber, burnt umber, and sepia. Yellow ochre down on the end.
Round trees.
So I've got burnt sienna, a little too warm for me. I'm going to bring some of this ultramarine over to it, and we'll try that. So the dry brush, you can't be bashful. This brush is right into that paint, loaded right up to the furrow both sides. Then I tap off the tip, and this paper towel is damp. It's not dry, so it's not sucking all the water out, but it's going to absorb some. One spot, second spot. I usually test it someplace, and all I have is the paper here. That's a little wet yet. So I'll take a little more off, and then I'm just going to go for it. The tough thing about this is the paper's buckled, so it's hard to lay this brush down flat, which needs to be done. It's basically set the brush on the paper and then pinch the handle up and then set that, pick it up, so you're painting with that section of bristle that's right here. It's the section from the furrow to the tip. What's happening, it's pinched at the furrow. It's glued in there and it's squeezed in there. When it comes out of the furrow, it's bulging out a little bit and then tapers down to the front end. So this is where the body of your paint is. That's probably a little light, but for the sake of the demonstration, that's it. So I'm grabbing a little more ultramarine blue and pulling it across and make it a little darker. I go through the same steps again. Again, I go down, and I do a lot of color testing in the primer, because 9 times out of 10, if these things work out, they're going to go into a matte, and I usually cover the outer ½ inch. So I have color to test down here. The good thing about doing that is if you put this thing aside and you're coming back later, you want to lay another color onto something in here. If you had tested that original color on the outside edge, you can take your new one and put it on that little patch and see if it's going to give you what you'd like it to be up here in the painting proper. Sometimes you're able to flip the brush over and get paint out of the other side. Let me throw some burnt umber in here. The drier the brush, the thicker, the heavier, the drier the pigment, the easier it is to dry brush. But it's not always the color, the flavor you want, so you got to add a little water sometimes to lighten that thing up. You do what you got to do. All right, let's bring some ultramarine into there. A little more burnt sienna. I'll just use this, I'll remix that. You notice I'm brushing the color into color, contaminate these things all over the place. That's just my style, the way I go. I'm not super careful. Darkest over on this side here. Might just put a little bit back in the area here. So now the attention seems to go to this barky stuff I put in there, and all that color that's down there is nothing more than coming through all of that and creating what I like to think is the light side and the dark side. All the little things that went on in there that looked bad, I think I pointed out a blossom of sorts in there, which I thought was pretty cool. You can't even find it in there at this point. Just lighten some of this up. And round brushes are doable with this, but you've got to keep turning them because the paint's on the whole circumference of the thing, and with the big flat brush it's a lot easier, and you're able to handle that a little better. I got till 9, do I? Is that right?
Yep.
All right, let's see what we can do with bird here. All right, so those little blossoms are still there. They didn't hold as nicely as what I thought they were before, but it gives me some character and almost looks like little leaves or blossoms or buds going on back there, and I think looks pretty foresty. So we'll give our red a shot here. I'm just going to add water as it goes up to the top of the crown here. Maybe I'll take just a tweak of the darker and drop it in down below here. That's all right. So we got black coming in, there's gonna cover that. Let's just soften this edge a little bit where the red's reaching the white on the side of his head there. Oh, before I forget, it's the advertising session of the sales pitch. Everything over there is for sale. All of those are basically demos that I've done in class. And then if they don't get finished, I take them home and finish them in the studio, maybe make modifications. They are all $60 plus tax. My wife and daughter in the back, they'd be more than happy to take cash, check, charge, $1 down, $1 a week, however you want to run it. All right, well, that's drying up there. Let's go back to Smokey here and see if we can damage him a little bit. And again, if you'd like to mix a brown by bringing all your primaries in and seeing what you get, I just grab some of these warm tones up here and get something going on. I just grabbed burnt umber, sepia, and burnt sienna and just kind of swirled them around, and we'll see what flavor I got for smoky down here. It could be a little redder. It could be a little lighter. And this is in shadow here, so I want that a little darker on that side. It's okay. And that's going to bleed into there. It almost looks black on the sign here, but we like Bear's brown, so we have the liberty to do that. I've got that same brown mix. I'm just going to add a little ultramarine to it and darken it up a little. And we'll go underneath the brim of his hat here. And I'm going to be a little graphic about my color application here. By that I mean somewhat deliberate and strokey. Maybe incomplete. And a quick nose job here. Basically a gesture of a shape. Find a brush that suits your lettering size. So I have a number of flats in here, not always readily available. You have to hunt for them. And kind of a weak, smoky red there. Let's bring a little bit of burnt sienna into that, and we'll just go with that. So I want it to say smoky, but a little on the hieroglyphic side. So more or less down and dirty. I think that's kind of there. Let that dry down. How are birds doing here? Mixing some more of my darkest dark. It's not black, but it's dark as I'm gonna get here. Again, a little more to the blue side than the brown side. I'd rather the bird coming up a little cooler than warmer. And we'll see how much we can get done here. What's that?
15 minutes.
Yeah. I think I'll use a flat brush. And watch me stick my arm in Smokey down here. I do it all the time, so. Again, this is pretty down and dirty here, so. You know, if I was doing this in the studio, it'd be much more patient, deliberate with it, but let's just see what we get here. The other thing is, any birders in the group here? Yeah. You have field guides. The most popular would be Peterson's. Yeah. And Sibley's is probably the next. Audubon has a couple out. They have a photographed one as well as, they may have an illustrated one, but. Those illustrations are perfect. If you've been to the Institute in Jamestown, all of or most of Peterson's birds are in drawers upstairs. And my good friend Len Russin and I had a show down there at one point, and they took us up and opened the drawers up and allowed us to touch, handle, photograph a few of the birds if we were so inclined, and that was pretty cool. But his birds are basically perfect, and that's because he's trying to illustrate. See the pain in my hand? All right. He's trying to illustrate what you should look for when you're birding, the things that are pretty much typical on that particular species. This bill is going to look terrible, but so I try and take advantage of that edge of the brush to get a little feathering action going on, and I'll attack this with a little water later. Well, if there is any later. I did draw these little patches out as best I could to do my best to save them. And again, if I was in the studio painting, I'd be a little slower and more deliberate. But not by much, because again, I like to think my modus operandi has changed a little bit, that I'm trying to suggest the species and not do a Peterson field guide rendition. Kind of lost my way here already. I'm kind of liking the variation in the dark tone here. The light's coming in from the top. So where am I going here? Yeah, I've kind of lost it a little bit here. All right, see how light that is? That's that darn cobalt, and I said I've never been good at making it dark enough when I slap that in. So down to 10, down to 10. Let's just take back up, grab some of the ultramarine to darken this section down here. And then I have been known to go in and just soften the edge like so, but I have at times taken the fan brush, and again, this is knowing your subject. The feathers on the breast are kind of in layers, and I want moderate, yeah, and you can just put some lineal work in there to represent a little feathering, and then maybe just schmutz in the brush here, so I should be in the clean water. Just soften some of that a little bit. Might even up here in the cheek where it was a little darker. And the water will disturb that dark and make it bleed a little bit. And that'll get rid of some of those hard edges. And get a little more gray up in the bill here. Not that much. This looks a little odd, but that's his eye down there. You want to see it up here, but that's actually sitting down there. All right, let's quickly attack the please. And I want this red to be a little darker, not so in your face, although we can change that up a little bit. So I've got, it's a little too big, going down to this brush here. And maybe that's too big. That's probably better. Smokey's hat, give him a little more color here. can't see anything. Is anybody out there yet? Riggers are awesome little tools for long lineal actions. Got 5 minutes, all right. Because the word pleased is outlined, I don't know whether you want to show that or not, but you can do a little bit possibly, maybe on the bottom side, the left and the bottom. I don't think you need to be perfect with it. Then, just to make things even worse, let's pull that burnt sienna out. And this sign has begun to rust in various spots. That burnt sienna is kind of neat.
Careful.
Yes, thank you. Kill some of this. And ordinarily probably want to get some more darks into the bear here a little bit, but anywho, that was fun. You get the idea. I actually dug up this mat. I used to do this all the time and rarely do it, but it helps to dress them up rather than just look at. And it's reading right this way to you, isn't it? Yeah. It's not upside down.
How's that go?
Okay, so basically this was about techniques, procedures, applications, tools, that kind of thing. That's pretty bad. But the elements are there, it's good, so thank you very much.